Have you ever had that strange feeling that something is off not with the world, but with you? Like you're playing a role you didn't audition for, living a life that's happening to you more than it's coming from you. You wake up in the morning and step right into the same identity, wear the same face, say the same things, chase the same goals, and yet, deep inside, there's a voice whispering, "This isn't me." That voice is not brokenness. It's not anxiety. According to Alan Watts, it's your true self trying to wake you up from the hypnosis of your ego. And if you're brave enough to listen, it might just shatter everything you thought was real, so you can finally be free. Welcome to the most dangerous idea in modern philosophy. You are not your ego. You are not who you think you are. You are not the voice in your head. You are not the story you've been telling yourself for years. And here's the kicker: your ego knows this. But it doesn't want you to know. Because the moment you see through the illusion, the entire structure collapses. And what's left? Not emptiness, not chaos, but something far more beautiful, far more real, a self that is not separate from life, but one with it. Watts called this realization the awakening, and it's the ultimate plot twist of your existence.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, let's be clear, the ego is not evil. It's not trying to ruin your life. It's just doing what it was designed to do: create a boundary between you and everything else. That's its job. It gives you a name, a backstory, a sense of control. But here's where things get tricky. The ego doesn't know when to stop. It doesn't know how to let go. It wants to own life, manipulate it, conquer it. And in doing so, it separates you from the very thing you're trying to experience. Life becomes a game of protection, performance, and pretending. And that, Watts says, is why so many of us feel dead inside even when everything looks successful on the outside. Because we've mistaken the map for the territory. The ego is the map. Life is the territory. And they're not the same. Let me ask you something radical. If you had no name, no job, no history, who would you be? And don't rush the answer. Close your eyes for a second. Let go of every label, every memory, every expectation. Who's left? What's left? Most of us panic in that space because the ego needs identity to survive. But Watts says, don't run from that emptiness. It's not emptiness at all. It's freedom. It's the raw, unfiltered presence of being. It's the truth beneath all the masks. And it's the one thing your ego cannot control. That's why it distracts you. That's why it keeps you scrolling, achieving, comparing, because silence is where the illusion dies. And here's the wild part. The ego doesn't live in the present. It lives in the past and the future. It is obsessed with memory and anticipation. Why? Because the present moment is too real, too alive. Alive, too raw. The ego can't survive in the now. It needs time to exist. It needs a story. But reality doesn't care about your story. It just is. And when you drop into that isness, when you actually feel the now, not think about it, but be in it, you begin to realize something shocking. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe looking at itself through a temporary lens. Your skin is not a boundary, it's a bridge. What you call you is the entire cosmos playing a role, wearing a costume, forgetting itself so it can rediscover itself in a new way. Watts called this the game of hide and seek. Consciousness hides itself in form so it can experience the joy of waking up. And your ego, it's just part of the game. It's the mask, but you're not the mask. You're the one behind it. And the moment you start to suspect that truth really suspect it, you enter a new dimension of living. You stop taking everything so seriously. You stop clinging to your image. You stop needing to be right or important or perfect. You start to play, not in a trivial way, but in a sacred way. Because you realize life is not a problem to be solved. It's a dance, a mystery, a song without a chorus. And the point was never to win, it was to wake up and join in. But waking up isn't easy. The ego fights back. It says, if I'm not in control, what will happen to me? The answer is nothing, because the ego was never real to begin with. It was a useful fiction, a role in a play. And when the curtain falls, the actor doesn't die, he takes off the costume and laughs. That's what awakening is. Not the death of self, but the death of the false self. The death of the illusion that you were ever separate from the whole. Watts said it best, you are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. And once you see that, you stop trying to make life happen. You start letting it unfold. Now let's zoom in. How does the ego actually lie to you day by day without you even realizing it? It tells you that you must become something, that you are not enough as you are, that fulfillment lies ahead, always just around the corner, that if you just fix yourself, or prove yourself or improve yourself, you'll finally be worthy. But Watts flips the script. He says, you are already it. You're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop. You don't need to become something, you need to remember what you already are. And that remembering, that's the beginning of peace. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine a newborn baby. That baby has no job, no resume, no social profile. And yet we look at it with awe. We don't ask it to prove its worth. We just recognize its being. Now ask yourself, when did you start believing that you had to earn the right to exist? Who taught you that you had to deserve love? That you had to achieve meaning? That you had to construct an identity that others approved of? These are the lies of the ego. And Watts is shaking us by the shoulders saying, wake up. You never lost your worth. You just forgot it in the noise of becoming. And in that forgetting we suffer. We chase shadows. We build empires of anxiety. We confuse motion with meaning. But the invitation of awakening is always here. Always now. It's in the breath. It's in the silence. It's in the space between your thoughts. You don't have to fix anything. You just have to see clearly. And when you do, the ego's grip begins to loosen. You laugh more. You fear less. You stop trying to find yourself and realize you were never lost. You were just playing hide and seek. So what happens after the illusion collapses? After you see through the ego's mask and realize it was never you to begin with. Most people think ego death is some dramatic, psychedelic explosion and obliteration of personality. But Alan Watts would smile and say, no, it's much simpler and infinitely more profound. Ego death is not the end of you. It's the end of taking the idea of you so seriously. It's the end of mistaking the narrator in your head for the truth of your being. You still walk, breathe, eat, laugh, cry, but now you do it from a place of lightness. Not because life becomes easy, but because you're no longer burdened by the illusion that you have to earn your place in it. As Watts puts it, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. Once you stop trying, you finally taste the freedom of being. And in that freedom, something incredible happens. Life begins to flow through you rather than against you. You stop micromanaging existence. You stop trying to script every outcome, manipulate every relationship, or control every emotion. You learn to trust the unfolding, not as some naive surrender, but as a deeper intelligence, one that doesn't come from logic, but from alignment. You start to notice synchronicities. You listen more. You feel more. You become attuned to the rhythm of life, like a dancer who finally hears the music instead of counting the steps. And suddenly you're not chasing happiness anymore, because you realize you are happiness itself, not the fleeting emotion, but the quiet, spacious joy of being fully present, with no need to become anything else. But the ego doesn't disappear overnight. It returns again and again, whispering doubt, fear, insecurity. It says they'll forget you if you stop performing, or you'll fall behind if you stop striving. And every time it does, you have a choice: believe the voice or observe it. That's the real practice, not fighting the ego, but watching it, seeing it arise, doing its dance, and then watching it fade, like clouds passing across the sky. You don't need to suppress it or destroy it. You just need to stop identifying with it. And in that space of awareness, you find a deeper center. Not the fragile self-image that crumbles under criticism, but the timeless self that simply is. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't fear death. It knows that it is not separate from anything. It is the entire process of life, dreaming itself into form. So here's the ultimate question Alan Watts would leave us with. If you are not the ego, then what are you? Are you the body, the mind, the breath, the awareness behind it all? Or are you something even more mysterious, something that can't be named, only experienced? That's the mystery. That's the invitation. To stop living as a character in your own story and start living as the awareness behind the story. Not passively, not aimlessly, but authentically, deeply. Awake, the ego says, I am a wave. But awakening says, I am the ocean. And once you remember that, you can finally live not in fear, not in performance, but in deep cosmic play. Because the joke is this: you were never separate. You just forgot. And now you remember. And once you remember, you can't unsee it. Life begins to shimmer with a kind of sacred absurdity you never noticed before. You laugh more, not because everything is funny, but because everything is real. The ridiculousness of worrying about status, image, or social comparison becomes so obvious that it's almost tragic. You see people, maybe even your former self, wrapped in layers of anxiety, trying to be someone, trying to matter, trying to catch the wind in their hands. But now you know you already are. You don't have to strive to become what you already are. The irony is cosmic. The moment you stop trying to be someone, you become everything. Because the ego's lie is that you are ever separate from the world. But the truth is, you are the very fabric of it. The flower unfolding, the wave returning to the ocean, the universe playing its favorite game, pretending to be you. This realization doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. But it's not the power of dominance or control. It's the power of alignment. When you act from ego, everything is effort. You push, you pull, you manipulate. But when you act from awareness, life begins to move through you effortlessly. You become a vessel for presence, for clarity, for creativity. You're no longer burdened by the fear of failure or the hunger for validation. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply expressing what is already true. And in that space, your work becomes more meaningful, your relationships become more authentic, and your experience of life becomes profoundly alive because you're no longer filtering it through the ego's agenda. You're just being, and that's more than enough. But this path is not without its tests. The world is loud. The ego is persistent. Every billboard, every post, every conversation can be a trigger that pulls you back into identification. That's okay. Awakening isn't a one-time event, it's a continual remembering. A practice of returning, over and over again. And every time you catch yourself lost in the old patterns, comparing, complaining, controlling, you don't need to punish yourself. You just wake up again. That's the beauty of this journey. It's not linear, it's spiral. Each time you return to presence, you return with more depth, more humility, more compassion for yourself and for everyone else who is also trying to wake up in a world designed to keep us asleep. So what do you do now? You live. Not in the way the ego demands with endless to-do lists and performance metrics, but in the way your soul longs for deeply, slowly, presently. You walk with awareness. You speak with intention. You listen with your whole being. You stop needing to chase meaning and start embodying it. You realize that the sacred is not found in some distant enlightenment, but right here in the dishes, in the breath, in the awkward silence and the belly laugh. Alan Watts didn't want us to escape the world. He wanted us to return to it with eyes wide open and hearts unarmored. Because when the ego dissolves, life doesn't end. It begins. And it begins in the only place it ever could, this moment, this breath, this mysterious, miraculous now. And in this mysterious now, something even more subtle begins to unfold. You start noticing the space between things, the pauses in conversation, the breath before a thought, the silence between heartbeats. And in that space, there's no narrative, no agenda, no me trying to manage or interpret. There's just being, pure, effortless existence. The ego hates this space because it can't control it. It has no use for stillness. But the deeper you go into it, the more you realize this space is who you are. Not the content of your life, the job, the opinions, the roles, but the awareness in which all that content appears. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. You are not the wave of emotion. You are the ocean that allows it. You are not the thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts arise and dissolve. And when you live from that, your entire relationship to life changes. Fear still comes, but it doesn't paralyze. Sadness still visits, but it doesn't consume. You begin to welcome every experience not because you enjoy all of them, but because you're no longer resisting reality. Watts called this the art of acceptance, but it's deeper than passive resignation. It's radical intimacy with life. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, success and failure, worthy and unworthy. You stop treating life like a courtroom where you're constantly on trial. Instead, you meet it as it is. And in doing so, you become free, not because everything becomes perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You are aligned with what is, not trapped in what should be. And that shift, that's awakening. Not a dramatic event, but a quiet, powerful return to truth. And here's the paradox. The more you live from this awakened space, the less you need to talk about it. The ego loves to claim enlightenment like a trophy. But the real thing is humble. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to convert people. It just is. You become a presence that others can feel, even if they can't explain it. You laugh more. You love more deeply. You suffer more openly because you're no longer ashamed of pain. You stop pretending. And that authenticity is contagious. You don't teach with words, you teach with being. Watts always said that spiritual truth is not something you explain, it's something you embody. And your very presence, once freed from the ego's grip, becomes a doorway for others to walk through. Not because you're trying to lead them, but because you've stopped hiding. So let me ask you this. If you drop the story of who you think you are, what would remain? If you stopped trying to be someone successful, spiritual, strong, what would you feel? Silence? Emptiness? Or maybe, just maybe, freedom? Freedom to breathe. Freedom to exist without justification. Freedom to be an expression of the universe with no need to impress, improve, or prove. That's what Alan Watts was pointing toward all along. Not a philosophy, but a realization. Not a dogma, but a doorway. And the only thing standing between you and that doorway is the voice in your head that says, not yet. But now you know the truth. That voice isn't you. It never was. It was just the echo of an old dream. And now it's time to wake up.